I have made almost 400 videos on this channel at this point, and probably about 200 of those are list videos going through cheap used cars, as you probably well know. And earlier this week I did a video on how much it's cost me to run 3 cheap used cars over the course of my time owning cars. But of the many cars I've spoken about in the past, which ones should you absolutely avoid to make sure that your wallet maintains some kind of integrity? How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to look at 10 cheap used cars that you can buy for like relatively reasonable prices considering what classes they're in, which have terrible reliability ratings or cost an absolute shed load to fix when they do go wrong. If you want to see a follow-up to this video with 10 more cars that you should avoid, let me know by hitting the like button. 1,000 likes now will make that video. Let me know in the comments down below as well what the most unreliable car you have ever owned is, and subscribe as well if you're new here. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's kick this video off with the R56 mini hatch, specifically with the 1.6 litre turbocharged inline 4 that makes 204 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 7.8 seconds. Though it is a nice little car and a cool badge to get into for a bit of a bargain, the problems might just outweigh the benefits. They start at around £5,000, you get a decent 2009 example for around £8,000, so it's on the cheaper end of this video, but you should go in with your eyes open as there is one major problem with these, the dreaded death rattle. This death rattle comes as a result of timing chain tensioners failing or getting loose, which can lead to catastrophic failures and a situation where you basically need to get either an entirely new engine or swap the car out entirely. You would notice this rattle on car startup and it kind of makes the car sound a bit like a tractor or something like that. Midway through the R56's life cycle, they swapped this unreliable N14 engine for the N18 engine instead, but strangely some people still prefer to go for that unreliable N14 block as it supposedly has better tuning capabilities. I personally wouldn't want to risk it and would always go for the newer N18 block instead to mitigate those problems. Next up we have the BMW 123D, which is a lovely little fast diesel car with its highly tunable 2 litre inline 4 turbocharged engine that produces 201 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 6.8 seconds. People absolutely love to map these and get way more performance than you would expect out of them, making them basically little sleeper cars. They are also incredibly cheap and start at around £3,500, and you'll maybe need to spend around £6,000 to get a 2009 example with reasonable mileage. Now I've included the 123D in many previous videos, but the key problem with it is that N47 engine block the early examples got. It is renowned for timing chain failures and early timing chain tensioner wear, which can either mean having to get an entirely new engine or at least get the timing chain and tensioners fixed. This can be hugely costly and generally just a complete headache. Some have gone as far as saying the N47 is BMW's most unreliable engine ever, so even though I think the 1 Series is a really good looking car, particularly in coupe spec, I wouldn't go for 123D just to avoid that hassle. Next up it's time for one of my favourite looking warm hatchbacks, the Renault Clio Renault Sport 197, with its 2 litre inline 4 engine that produces 194 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 6.7 seconds. I've spoken about it in many previous videos and I genuinely do think it looks good, sounds good, and generally has good tech put into it, like the Formula 1 air ducts for the brakes and the Venturi tunnel for additional downforce. The engine really isn't bad in the Clio. The main problem is the gearbox, which is renowned for synchro issues even early on in life. I've spoken to some owners who have had to replace gearboxes more than once in their time owning a 197, with many people comparing the gearboxes to sludge. I've heard some owners also complaining about the build quality on the interiors as well, as if to add insult to injury. Luckily they are quite cheap, starting at around £3,000, and you want to spend around £6,000 to get into a decent 2008 example. Next up we have a car that I've rarely featured on this channel, the Mazda 6 MPS, which has a 2.3 litre inline 4 turbocharged engine that makes 256 brake horsepower, which will get it from 0 to 60 in 6.4 seconds, helped by the fact that it's all-wheel drive. These are very rare cars in the UK, and just £5,000 will get you into one, but you'll need to spend around £7,000 to get into a good condition example. Generally when people talk about unreliable Mazdas, they talk about the Mazda RX-8 with its rotary engine that is very difficult to work on. However, it's actually the 6 MPS that has some of the proper issues, which are also probably very important in why it's so cheap today. The design of the intercooler wasn't very good as it was placed in an awkward spot where it collects a lot of heat, which is detrimental to the life of the engine. The rods are also known to be quite poor, as both big and small end failure is known. On top of this, the turbos are also known to fail, amongst a whole host of other other issues, making this car way less enticing than it really should be. But if you want an MPS, go for the Mazda 3 instead, that would be my advice. The problems with the Peugeot RCZ R are not quite as catastrophic as some of the other cars on this list, but owners do complain about a lot of potential issues that can cause you a bit of a headache. It has a 1.6 litre turbocharged inline-4 engine that produces 266 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 5.7 seconds, not bad at all for a Peugeot. I think it doesn't look bad either, in fact it's a very good looking car both on the exterior and interior. But looks don't mean everything, which is proven by the fact that these have actually been going down in value over the past 2 years despite the used car price bubble. You can get these now starting at around £12,000 and 15 grand will get you a nice 2014 example. Just know that when you buy one, owners on forums note a whole bunch of potential problems like rattling exhausts, internal rattles, squeaky or grinding brakes, knocking front suspension, oil leaks, water leaks, weak clutches, electrical issues and the sat-nav and stereo failing, boot release failure, and even more things I haven't got time to go through in this video. Lots of those issues are live-withable, as it's mostly build quality related, but it's still a bit of a shame. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, a quick reminder, let me know in the comments down below what the most unreliable car is you've ever owned or someone you know has owned. And if you haven't already, do hit like 1,000 likes and make a follow-up to this video, and subscribe as well if you're new here. I love a good Porsche 911, and I'm actually a big fan of the 996 generation despite the fried egg headlights. One thing that is a slight issue though is the potential catastrophic failures that also come with high repair costs given it's a Porsche. The 996.2 generation came with a 3.6 litre flat 6 engine that produces 320 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds, at least in Carrera 2S spec. And today you'll get into this lovely Porsche anywhere from around £10,000, and if you spend £15,000 you get a 2004 example with reasonable mileage. The major problems with the 996 are well known, as it comes from the era of IMS and RMS failure, as well as bore scoring issues. I know this list is about cars to avoid, so the bearings are probably not worth avoiding a 911 over, as there are strengthening kits available for basically every Porsche of that era. It's the bore scoring that I would be most concerned about, which comes from overheating cylinders. This can happen to cars that have only completed short journeys for long periods of time, or cars that haven't had their cooling system well maintained, so it's very hard to tell whether a 996 that you're buying is close to having a bore scoring problem, making it a bit of a risk, although it is generally a relatively low number of cars. If you've watched the channel for a while, you'll know that I absolutely adore the Subaru Impreza, particularly the WRX STI, but unfortunately it is renowned for many failures relating to that 2.5 litre turbocharged boxer 4 engine that produces 276 brake horsepower, which takes from 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds, though of course many people will tell you they're much more powerful and performant than that, especially given their success in the World Rally Championship. The problem with these though is head gasket failure on that 2.5 litre block, which some owners have ended up replacing with the 2 litre one instead. The piston rings are also known to be very weak, and when you add on the classic Japanese rust and standard wear and tear, these Imprezas become way less enticing. Another problem is that many of them have been tuned over their lifespan, as they are typically boy racer cars. In some cases that's great, in other cases where the tuning hasn't been done well enough, you might be buying into a world of headaches. This is why untouched examples are becoming so highly sought after and a bit of a collector's car, hence they are already starting at around £10,000, with £15,000 letting you a pretty good example. From one car I adore to another, the Lotus Elise Series 2 is a really cool car, but unfortunately early examples were given the Rover K Series 1.8 litre inline 4 engine that makes 156 brake horsepower, and they'll do 0 to 60 in 5.1 seconds. It starts at around 15k and you need to spend around 20 grand to get a solid example. Now that Rover K Series block was built for front engine cars originally, meaning the cooling was much simpler because all of the air hitting the front of the car went straight into the engine to help with cooling. It was much harder for the air to help cool the engine in a mid-engined Lotus Elise, which is why it suffered so badly, as cars were running into head gasket failure at an alarming rate early on in life. As a result of this, some owners ended up engine swapping the cars entirely, which is why you see a few that have been VTEC swapped, and I even met a guy recently who's swapping an EcoBoost engine into his one. Because all in, this is an incredibly dynamic, fun and relatively exotic sports car, it's just that K-Series block that really let the early examples down. If you can buy a later example, you'll escape these failures, as you can get the Toyota block instead, which Lotus literally put into their car to help turn their reliability reputation around. We've got two V10s taking the top two spots in this video, with the Audi S6 C6 being our runner-up, with its 5.2 litre V10 engine that makes 428 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. It comes as both the Avant and Saloon, both of which are mad cool cars, because who doesn't want a V10 family car that costs just £7,000 at the bottom end? They aren't actually bad on reliability really, which I'm sure will surprise you based on the title of this video. The problem comes with a lack of forward planning by Audi, which is a real shame. The C5 generation S6 had a timing belt, which was more likely to go wrong during the lifespan of the car, which Audi upgraded for the C6 generation to a timing chain that would last the engine's lifetime. With this in mind, they moved the timing chain to the back of the engine, not expecting people to need to work on it. However, the timing chain tensioners were not strong enough for the engine's full lifespan and would fail. If caught on time by hearing some rattles on startup, you could get the tensioners changed, but it would require a full engine out job, meaning expenses with your mechanic may rack up quickly. If you don't catch it on time, then good luck buying a new 5.2 litre V10 engine block. Taking the top spot is a car that is rapidly becoming an icon, but I'm sad to say it's yet another BMW, making it effectively the third on this list if you include the Mini. It comes with that hallowed, high-revving 5-litre V10 engine which produces 499 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. If you buy one today, treat it like the iconic modern classic car it is, and expect to own it more as a showpiece than as a daily sports car. It is hugely let down by reliability issues coming from that temperamental engine and gearbox, and if you take a trip to owners forums, you'll see some proper horror stories. I know a guy who owns one and he barely ever drives it because it's better off appreciating in value than costing him maintenance and repair costs out on the roads. The main problem to note is the red cog of death, which comes from the SMG gearbox failing, but valve springs are also known to go wrong, which costs around $10,000 to repair on its own. Rod bearings and throttle actuators are also known to go wrong, and as I said, it's not cheap to fix. Price wise it's not bad though, starting around £13,000, and low mileage ones start at £18,000. And so concludes this video on cheap cars that you should probably avoid because you want to maintain some money in your bank account. Huge thanks to patrons for their support and to you guys as well for watching. But if you want to see this in practice, then do click over here where you'll find out exactly how much it costs for me to run 3 cheap used cars, and click down here as well to subscribe. I put out 2 videos every week, so you might as well.